There's a strip of water between Iran and Oman that's 21 miles wide, carries 20% of the world's oil every single day, and has shipping lanes narrower than a two-lane highway. For decades, every major power on Earth has operated under one assumption: that oil will keep flowing through it. On February 28, 2026, that assumption collapsed. Iran locked the door, mined the hallway, and told the world that any ship that enters will be set on fire. This is the Strait of Hormuz, explained like you're five. Every drop of oil leaving the Persian Gulf by sea passes through one place, the Strait of Hormuz. It sits between Iran to the north and Oman and the United Arab Emirates to the south, connecting the Gulf to the open ocean. There's no detour, no side door, no secret tunnel. If you're Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Kuwait, Qatar, Bahrain, or the UAE, and you want to ship oil to the rest of the planet, you drive your tanker through this 21-mile gap, or you don't ship at all. Think of it like a building with one exit. 6 countries live inside. All of them need to leave every single day carrying 20 million barrels of oil, and someone just blocked the door. In 2024, 20 million barrels of oil flowed through it every single day. That's 1/5 of everything the world burns. 1/5 of the world's natural gas shipments too, mostly from Qatar. 84% of it headed straight to Asia. China, India, Japan, South Korea, 4 countries that together account for nearly 70% of all crude moving through the strait. Japan gets 87% of its total energy from imported fossil fuels. South Korea, 81%. For them, Hormuz isn't a shipping lane. It's an oxygen tube. The United States, by comparison, barely sips from the Hormuz straw. American imports through the strait account for just 2% of U.S. petroleum consumption, the lowest level in nearly 40 years. But it doesn't matter because oil is priced on a global market. When Hormuz chokes, prices spike everywhere, including at every gas station in Nebraska. And it's not just fuel. 1/3 of the world's fertilizer trade passes through the strait. 85% of the Middle East's plastic exports, the stuff in your food packaging, your water bottles, your medical supplies. Hormuz doesn't just keep cars running, it keeps farms planting and hospitals stocked. Now here's the part that makes military planners sweat. Iran sits directly on top of it. The strait is so narrow that at its tightest point, Iran and Oman are practically neighbors who can see into each other's kitchens. Iran has fortified the islands along its coast, Qeshm in particular, with missiles, drones, and air defenses. Behind those islands, the Zagros Mountains give Iran natural cover for launchers that can hit anything in the water below. One country sitting on the world's most important choke point, armed to the teeth with a geographic high ground, like a toll booth operator with a rocket launcher. Iran has been threatening to close the Strait of Hormuz for 40 years, and for 40 years the world has treated each threat the same way. Panic, deploy a flotilla, wait for Iran to back down, exhale. Like a kid who keeps saying he's going to flip the board game. Everyone rolls their eyes until one day he actually does it. It started during the Iran-Iraq War. Between 1981 and 1988, Iraq and Iran attacked 451 commercial ships in the Persian Gulf. Iraq hit 283. Iran hit 168. Over 100 sailors killed. 30 million tons of cargo damaged. Iran perfected the art of speedboat attacks, sending Revolutionary Guard boats screaming toward tankers and concentrating fire directly on crew compartments. Kuwait begged the international community for help, and the United States responded by slapping American flags on Kuwaiti tankers, essentially saying, "Go ahead, hit one, see what happens." Then came July 3, 1988. The USS Vincennes, a U.S. Navy cruiser, shot down Iran Air Flight 655 over the strait. A civilian Airbus with 290 people on board. Every single person died. The Navy said they misidentified it as a fighter jet. Iran has never forgotten it, never forgiven it. It's seared into the national memory like a wound that never closed. Was it an accident? The U.S. said yes. Did Iran believe them? Would you? In 2011, when the EU slapped sanctions on Iranian oil, Tehran threatened to shut the strait entirely. An Iranian general said it would be easy. The U.S. assembled 3 aircraft carriers, 7 British warships, and a French frigate in the Gulf. Defense Secretary Leon Panetta said the U.S. would not tolerate a closure. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Dempsey, said the U.S. would take action and reopen the strait, which everyone understood meant by force. Iran backed down. In 2019, Iran attacked 2 oil tankers and seized a British-flagged vessel. The pattern held: provoke, escalate, retreat. But here's the thing about patterns. They hold right up until they don't. February 28, 2026, 6:35 a.m. Coordinated Time. The United States Central Command announced it had begun airstrikes against Iran. B-2 stealth bombers, B-1 Lancers, B-52 Stratofortresses, Tomahawk cruise missiles from warships. The Israeli Air Force launched 200 fighter jets, the largest combat sortie in its history. The strikes were designed to cut the head of the snake. Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei was killed at his residential compound alongside several senior officials. Hundreds of military sites hit. Missile launchers, radar stations, drone bases, communication centers, all targeted in the opening hours. 2 days earlier, nuclear talks in Geneva had ended without a deal. 48 hours later, the bombs fell. Iran's response was immediate and broad. By 9 a.m., 170 ballistic missiles were in the air toward Israel. Strikes hit Haifa and Tel Aviv. Missiles also hit the U.S. Fifth Fleet Service Center in Bahrain and targets across Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the UAE, and Kuwait. Iran wasn't just retaliating against the attackers, it was punishing anyone nearby. And then came the strait, the thing every energy analyst had feared for 40 years. Within hours of the first bombs, Iran's Revolutionary Guards began broadcasting on maritime radio. Ship passage through the Strait of Hormuz is not allowed. On March 2nd, they made it official. Any vessel that enters will be set on fire. Not a threat, a declaration. By March 12th, 3 cargo ships had been hit and Iran had dropped roughly a dozen mines into the water. The new Supreme Leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, the dead leader's son, said closing the strait would be easier than drinking a glass of water. Over 200 tankers and commercial vessels sat anchored outside the strait, waiting, more than 50 of them flying the Chinese flag. About 90 ships had crossed since the war began, most of them running with their tracking systems off, essentially invisible, and likely tied to Iran itself. The U.S. dropped 5,000-pound bunker-busting bombs on Iranian missile sites along the coast, but the drones and mines kept coming. For the first time in the strait's history, the door was closed. 3 weeks before the bombs fell, Russia, China, and Iran held joint naval exercises in the Strait of Hormuz. They called it Maritime Security Belt 2026. Russia's presidential aide said they were building a multipolar world order on the oceans, which is diplomat speak for "we're teaming up against the West." It looked like a show of solidarity, a unified front. Then the war started and the front evaporated. Neither China nor Russia committed a single soldier. No combat operations, no direct military support. Both abstained from UN resolutions condemning Iran's attacks on Gulf states. Both called for diplomacy. Neither did much about it. But their silence isn't neutral. It's strategic. Russia benefits from every barrel of oil that doesn't flow through Hormuz because when the Gulf oil stops, global prices spike, and when global prices spike, Russian oil sells for more. Higher prices fund the war in Ukraine. Vladimir Putin doesn't need the strait open. He needs it chaotic. Russia runs what's called a shadow fleet, unmarked tankers that dodge Western sanctions to sell oil under the table. Those tankers were headed to China, but mid-voyage, they started rerouting to India, following the money, not the alliance. China is in a stranger position. 40% of its oil imports pass through Hormuz. More than 50 Chinese-flagged ships were stuck outside the strait when Iran closed it. Beijing sent naval vessels toward the region, held talks with Tehran about safe passage for Chinese tankers, and publicly demanded the strait reopen. But it also refused to blame Iran and condemn the American strikes. The calculation: keep the oil flowing, keep Tehran friendly, and watch the United States burn through military resources 12,000 miles from Taiwan. Every carrier group parked in the Persian Gulf is a carrier group not in the Pacific. Enter the United States. President Trump told allies they should be responsible for the strait, called their refusal to help pretty absurd, and threatened to massively blow up Iran's gas fields if they attack Qatar. The U.S. launched a $20 billion insurance program to restart shipping. Secretary of State Chris Wright announced the first Navy-escorted tanker had passed through, then had to take it back because it hadn't actually happened. Yes, really. NATO said it was discussing the best way to reopen the waterway. Translation: nobody has a plan. Within 3 weeks, oil prices surged from $70 a barrel to nearly $120. They've settled around $108, which is still 50% higher than where they were before the first bomb dropped. In the United States, gas jumped from $2.98 a gallon to $3.79, the first time every single state crossed $3 since 2023. Diesel blew past $5. Airlines raised fares. Trucking companies raised rates. Grocery chains raised prices. The whole supply chain moved in one direction, up. Asia got hit harder. Fuel shortages in Thailand, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. Lines at gas stations that look like Black Friday at Walmart, except nobody's buying a TV. They're trying to drive to work. Japan and South Korea, which import almost all their energy, face the most immediate risk. India, which depends on Gulf crude for about half its supply, scrambled for alternatives. One energy analyst called it an acute crisis. Another called it a real gut punch. The International Energy Agency, basically a club of 32 oil-importing countries that keep emergency barrels locked away for exactly this kind of disaster, responded with the largest reserve release in history. 400 million barrels. The U.S. alone contributed 172 million from its own stockpile. It sounds massive. It covers about 20 days of lost supply. The oil won't reach Asian refineries until mid-May. One expert at Chatham House called it a temporary fix and a high-risk strategy. Saudi Arabia tried a workaround, cranking up its east-west pipeline to reroute crude to the Red Sea. The pipeline can handle 7 million barrels a day. Pre-war, it was moving 2.8. Loadings doubled in March, but the Red Sea route passes through another narrow strait called Bab el-Mandeb, yet another choke point where Houthi militants have attacked ships before. The pipeline was never designed to run at full capacity for months. One analyst called it a pressure valve, not a full solution. And here's the number that should keep everyone up at night: 20%. That's how much of the world's energy supply passes through the Strait of Hormuz. Bob McNally, a former White House energy advisor, put it as bluntly as anyone has. The world economy cannot grow without 20% of its energy supply. A prolonged closure, he said, would almost certainly trigger a global recession. The strait has been closed for 3 weeks. The mines are still in the water. The drones are still flying. 200 ships are still parked outside the entrance, and the world's most important hallway is still locked. Because the thing about a choke point is that it works both ways. The same geography that lets 20 million barrels through every day also lets one country shut it all down. 21 miles, 2-lane shipping, and one locked door.